Sir Leslie Stephen KCB was an English author, critic, historian, biographer, and mountaineer, and father of Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell. Life. Stephen was born at Kensington Gore in London, and son of Sir James Stephen and Lady Jane Catherine Stephen. His father was Colonial Under-Secretary of State and a noted abolitionist. He was the fourth of 5 children. His siblings, including James Fitzjames Stephen and Caroline Amelia Stephen. His family had belonged to the Clapham sect, the early 19th century group of mainly evangelical Christian social reformers. At his father's house he saw a good deal of the Macaulays, James Spedding, Sir Henry Taylor and Nassau Sr. After studying at Eton College, King's College London and Trinity Hall, Cambridge, where he graduated B.A. in 1854 and M.A. in 1857, Stephen remained for several years a fellow and tutor of his college. He recounted some of his experiences in a chapter in his Life of Fawcett, as well as in some less formal sketches from Cambridge by Don. These sketches were reprinted from the Pall Mall Gazette, the proprietor of which, George Murray Smith, he had been introduced by his brother. Marriage. Harriet Thackeray 1867 to 1875. The family connections included that of William Makepeace Thackeray. His brother, Fitzjames, had been a friend of Thackeray's and assisted in the disposition of his estate when he died in 1863. His sister Caroline met Thackeray's daughters, Annie and Minnie, when they were mutual guests of Julia Margaret Cameron. This led to an invitation to visit from Leslie Stephen's mother, Lady Stephen, where the sisters met him. They also met at George Murray Smith's house at Hampstead. Minnie and Leslie became engaged on December 4, 1866, and married on June 19, 1867. After the wedding they travelled to the Swiss Alps and northern Italy, and on return to England lived at the Thackeray sisters' home at 16 Onslow Gardens with Annie, who was a novelist. In the spring of 1868 Minnie miscarried but recovered sufficiently for the couple to tour the eastern United States. Minnie miscarried again in 1869, but became pregnant again in 1870, and on December 7 gave birth to their daughter, Laura Makepeace Stephen. Laura was premature, weighing 3 pounds. In March 1873 Thackeray and the Stephens moved to 8 Southwell Gardens. The couple travelled extensively, and by 1875 Minnie was pregnant again, but this time was in poor health. On November 27 she developed convulsions, and died the following day of eclampsia. After Minnie's death, Leslie Stephen continued to live with Annie, but they moved to 11 Hyde Park Gate South in 1876, next door to her widowed friend and collaborator, Julia Duckworth. Leslie Stephen and his daughter were also cared for by his sister, the writer Caroline Amelia Stephen, although Leslie described her as Silly Millie, and her books as little works. Meanwhile, Annie was falling in love with her younger cousin Richmond Ritchie, to Leslie Stephen's consternation. Ritchie became a constant visitor, and they became engaged in May 1877, and were married on August 2. At the same time, Leslie Stephen was seeing more and more of Julia Duckworth. Julia Duckworth 1878 to 1895. His second marriage was to Julia Princep Duckworth. Julia had been born in India, and after returning to England she became a model for pre-Raphaelite painters such as Edward Burne-Jones. In 1867 she had married Herbert Duckworth, by whom she had 3 children prior to his death in 1870. Leslie Stephen and Julia Duckworth were married on March 26, 1878. They had 4 children. Vanessa married Clive Bell. Toby. Virginia married Leonard Woolf. Adrian. In May 1895, Julia died of influenza, leaving her husband with 4 young children aged 11 to 15. Career. In the 1850s, Stephen and his brother James Fitzjames Stephen were invited by Frederick Denison Morris to lecture at the Working Men's College. Leslie Stephen became a member of the college's governing college corporation. Stephen was an honorary Fellow of Trinity Hall, Cambridge, and received the honorary degree Doctor of Letters from the University of Cambridge and from the University of Oxford. While at Cambridge, Stephen became an Anglican clergyman. In 1865, having renounced his religious beliefs, and after a visit to the United States 2 years earlier, where he had formed lasting friendships with Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., James Russell Lowell and Charles Eliot Norton, he settled in London and became a journalist, eventually editing the Cornhill magazine in 1871, where R.L. Stevenson, Thomas Hardy, W. E. Norris, Henry James, and James Paine figured among his contributors. In his spare time, he participated in athletics and mountaineering. He also contributed to the Saturday Review, Fraser, Macmillan, The Fortnightly, and other periodicals. He was already known as a climber, as a contributor to Peaks, Passes and Glaciers, and as one of the earliest presidents of the Alpine Club, when, in 1871, in commemoration of his own first ascents in the Alps, he published The Playground of Europe, which immediately became a mountaineering classic, drawing, together with Wimper's Scrambles Amongst the Alps, successive generations of its readers to the Alps. During the 11 years of his editorship, in addition to 3 volumes of critical studies, he made 2 valuable contributions to philosophical history and theory. The first was the history of English thought in the 18th century. This work was generally recognized as an important addition to philosophical literature and led immediately to Stephen's election at the Athenaeum Club in 1877. The second was The Science of Ethics. It was extensively adopted as a textbook on the subject and made him the best-known proponent of evolutionary ethics in late 19th century Britain. Stephen also served as the first editor of the Dictionary of National Biography. Mountaineering. Stephen was one of the most prominent figures in the golden age of alpinism, during which many major alpine peaks saw the first ascents. Joining the Alpine Club in 1857, Stephen made the first ascent, usually in the company of his favorite Swiss guide Melchior Anderegg, of the following peaks: Wildstrubel the 11th of September 1858 with T.W. Hinchliffe and Melchior Anderegg; Biechhorn the 13th of August 1859 with Anton Segan, Johann Segan and Joseph Ebener; Rimpfischhorn the 9th of September 1859 with Robert Living, Melchior Anderegg and Johann Zumthorwald; Alfubel the 9th of August 1860 with T.W. Hinchliffe, Melchior Anderegg and Peter Perrin; Blumleys Alphorn the 27th of August 1860 with Robert Living, Melchior Anderegg, F. OGI, P. Simond and J. K. Stone; Schreckhorn the 16th of August 1861 with Ulrich Kaufmann, Christian Michel and Peter Michel; Monte Discrasia the 23rd of August 1862 with E. S. Kennedy, Thomas Cox and Melchior Anderegg; Zinnel-Rothorn the 22nd of August 1864 with Florence Crawford Grove, Jacob Anderegg and Melchior Anderegg; Montmallet the 4th of September 1871 with G. Loppe, F. A. Walrod, Melchior Anderegg, Ch. and A. Telrúnya. He was president of the Alpine Club from 1865 to 1868. Works: The Pole Degree from a Third Point of View; The Times on the American War, A Historical Study; Sketches from Cambridge; The Playground of Europe; Essays on Free Thinking and Plain Speaking; Hours in a Library; The History of English Thought in the 18th Century; Samuel Johnson. Swift, The Science of Ethics, Life of Henry Fawcett, An Agnostic's Apology, and other essays. Sir Victor Brooke, sportsman and naturalist. The Life of Sir James Fitzjames Stephen, Bart. KCSI, Social Rights and Duties, Studies of a Biographer. The English Utilitarians. George Eliot, English Literature and Society in the 18th Century. Hobbes. Death. He died in Kensington. He is buried in the eastern section of Highgate Cemetery in the raised section alongside the northern part. His daughter, Virginia Woolf, was badly affected by his death, and she was cared for by his sister, Caroline. Woolf in 1922 created a detailed psychological portrait of him in the fictional character of Mr. Ramsay in her classic novel, To the Lighthouse. The family trees of the Stephens, Thackeray's and Jacksons, see Bicknell and Bloom and Maynard. Bibliography.